Game preservation, Xbox will be at Gamescom 2021, and Netflix is officially entering the ring of game streaming. One of my favorite features with the Xbox Series X and S is just the work that Xbox has put in preserving older games, where you're able to play a bunch of original Xbox 360s, and Xbox One games on the Xbox Series X and S. It is definitely the ultimate console right now when it comes to backwards compatibility, and the way that they are upgrading the games with the FPS boost, the auto HDR, faster load times if they're on the SSD. All of these things are making playing older games a lot more enjoyable than they were back on the Xbox One, the 360, and the OG Xbox. And one of the biggest things when it comes to the release of a brand new console is the narrative that new consoles are not for older games, and I couldn't disagree more with that. I think that is just an absolutely bad opinion, in my opinion, because when a new console comes out, the majority of the time for the first couple of years, there isn't that many great next generation titles that come onto the console. And the way that you get use out of these consoles is by playing these older games, these cross-generational games, these games that get upgrades that we are seeing here with the FPS and the resolution. And we're in a day and age where we've kind of almost hit a peak for video games in the way that they are going to be able to look and how big they're going to be. We're almost at diminishing returns. Obviously, there's going to be those small technical upgrades like ray tracing that make games just look extremely sharp and more lifelike. But at the end of the day, there are still so many amazing games that you can play from the Xbox One era and even the Xbox 360 era that have aged well and are still fun to play. So when we jump over to these next gen consoles, it's not like jumping from, let's say, the Super Nintendo to the N64, where there was that massive leap in a generation, or from like the N64 to like the GameCube or the OG Xbox or the PS1 to the PS2. Those are major gaps in console generations. Now we're getting smaller incremental gaps. Well, Phil Spencer feels similarly when it comes to preserving older games to be able to play forever, pretty much. So on the Kind of Funny Gamecast, he said that he was worried about the state of video game preservation and called for platform holders to come together to figure out a way to safeguard the industry's history. And this is great to hear, especially coming from Phil Spencer, and if you're in the Xbox ecosystem, because it just kind of further proves that Xbox is very committed to backwards compatibility to make sure that we are still going to be able to play older games on the Xbox Series X and S. So he says here, I do worry a little bit about losing our art form and the history of it when I think about old ROMs and MAME and these things where these old games are going to go as the hardware that's capable of running those games. I really wish as an industry we'd come together to help preserve the history of what gaming is about so we don't lose the ability to go back. He also talks about the cloud and how the cloud really allows for more preservation because you're not restricted to the actual hardware within the player's home. With the cloud, obviously you can do a lot more things than you would be able to do, let's say, on an Xbox One. If they are able to bring cloud gaming to the Xbox One, not only is it going to be great for game preservation, it's going to allow people who haven't yet upgraded to the Xbox Series X or S to be able to experience next generation games through the cloud. So the cloud is going to be a very powerful thing going forward in this generation for backwards compatibility and for next gen gaming. Phil Spencer saying, on preservation, one of the things that the cloud does offer us is the ability to throw more hardware at some of the emulation scenarios to make it possible to really emulate. When the team figured out how to emulate PowerPC instruction sets on x86 set, which was how we went from 360 to Xbox One backwards compatibility, we were kind of lucky that the Xbox One had enough processing power to pull off that emulation. When we're in the cloud, we don't have to worry about the local compute capability to emulate those old systems. Most of those old systems are pretty low spec, so it's not a huge issue, but I do like that we're able to elevate it beyond just the device that somebody has in their home. It's one of the reasons why we look at the cloud and why we continue on some of our backwards compatibility work, which we are still working on, because I want those games to still be playable, and not just from an Xbox standpoint. Take Psychonauts. I want somebody to be able to play that regardless of what controller they want to use or what platform they bought it on. And that's super cool, because we also saw a ad on Twitter where it was Xbox Game Pass xCloud ad where there was pictures going by and you could see like what game you wanted to play, what platform you're playing it on, and with what controller. And they had the PS4 controller in there and other platform controllers, that showing that you can play Xbox games through xCloud, not just with an Xbox controller, but with any controller that you desire. And just to add to the backwards compatibility talk here, there's some more interesting stuff that we can get from one of the reasons why they put backwards compatibility games and what they do with the data they receive from the older games that people play. Phil Spencer says that they look at the older games that people are playing in order to determine reboots that could potentially be made. So he was specifically asked if they look at the numbers for the older games that people are playing and if those encourage reboots, and his response was absolutely it does, claiming that Xbox Game Pass is a great source. And that does make a lot of sense, because you can go back and you look at all the backwards compatibility games people are playing. We're seeing a reboot of Fable, we're seeing a reboot of Perfect Dark, and maybe those numbers have increased significantly. I know I've beaten both Fable 1 and Fable 2 again on my Xbox Series X through the backwards compatibility, and I'll probably go through Fable 3 sometime before Fable 4 comes out, which I'm sure there's a lot of time before that. In terms of Perfect Dark, I've played that one as well, which, I mean, maybe there's tons of people that are doing the same thing as me. Now, one of the big games people are looking for is Banjo and Kazooie. So if you're somebody out there who wants a Banjo and Kazooie reboot, go out there and start playing the games on Game Pass, because you want to increase those numbers, and maybe that will entice Xbox to finally make that Banjo and Kazooie remake, reboot, whatever that people have been waiting for. And I think Banjo and Kazooie for Xbox is such an area of opportunity for the Xbox Game Studios portfolio to get an awesome 3D platformer that everybody can look at and play and recognize that this is Xbox's 3D platforming mascot, or whatever you want to call it, sort of in the sense of like Super Mario or Ratchet and Clank. So I think all of this stuff is just awesome. This is one of the main reasons that I absolutely am loving Xbox right now. They really do care about these things, because they wouldn't be putting all of this work in to upgrade older games to provide FPS boosts if they didn't care, right? So we're seeing more FPS boost games coming. I can't wait to see what's coming out later down the line. Dark Souls 3 just dropped. I'm hoping we'll get a larger batch before the end of the year and as we go through this generation. And overall, with my Xbox Series X and S, I've been playing tons of older games. I've been playing original Xbox games, and I've been playing a lot of 360 games. I'm actually even just playing the original Assassin's Creed right now, because I was going through my library and the nostalgia hit me and I wanted to just jump in. And it brings back so many good memories, especially with that game, because when that game first came out, it wasn't the highest rated game. It wasn't a game, the Assassin's Creed that we see today. It's not even close, but you really got the concept of what they were going for, and I still think it's a pretty fun game to play. So like, those are types of experiences that you can't get on other consoles with the ease of access for the backwards compatibility with the Xbox Series X and S. All right, and moving on here to an upcoming, I'm assuming, Xbox event that is going to take place at Gamescom 2021, because it has been confirmed that Xbox will be attending the event. So the event is going to be taking place on starting August 25th, and it's going to be again kicked off by Jeff Keighley, who always does these like opening night streams or shows before these big events, and it's going to be between August 25th and August 27th. So that should be exciting. Xbox is probably going to be showing off games that are going to be coming out very soon. That's generally what happens at Gamescom. From what I remember, they don't have too many big reveal trailers or anything like that. It's more of just diving into the stuff that we can expect this year and maybe next year. So that's exciting. I'm excited to see when the show is going to be. I will most likely be streaming the Xbox Gamescom event, so make sure to stay tuned for that. It's an all digital event, just like E3. They were going to do a hybrid event, but they decided not to do that anymore because of what is going on with the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions in Europe. So it looks like xCloud is officially going to have another competitor, as Netflix is planning on offering video games through a streaming service. So this comes according to Bloomberg that Netflix has reportedly hired Mike Verdu, who is a former Electronic Arts and Facebook executive, to lead the streaming giant's game streaming efforts. And Verdu will join Netflix as the streaming company's vice president of game development and will report directly to Chief Operating Officer Greg Peters. Now, these are rumors we've heard a while that Netflix was trying to jump into the game subscription arena, and I guess kind of go against Xbox Game Pass, which would be the main competitor right now. I mean, there's also Google Stadia. I believe there's still Amazon Luna out there. So those are the other competitors, but the main competitor is Xbox Game Pass. It is the most successful one. And on top of what you get with Xbox Game Pass, you have xCloud, which is their streaming service, obviously. And I think that's where Netflix is trying to compete. However, it has been mentioned in previous reports that they look to be making more of an Apple Arcade style of streaming service. So their main competitor may not be xCloud. It probably is going to be more focused on what Apple is doing with Apple Arcade. And I believe Apple Arcade has been relatively successful with their offerings, with the pricing and all that kind of stuff, because Apple Arcade offers more like mobile games, more like casual games, if you want to put it that way, and they aren't offering those big AAA experiences that you're getting on Xbox Game Pass. And I think for Netflix, that is an area where they could potentially compete. I think it would be pretty hard, even though with how big Netflix is and how successful they are with streaming and with their subscription model with TV and movies, to compete on a AAA level with Xbox Game Pass, because how hard it is to develop games and to get developers to make successful AAA games. We've seen the issues with Google Stadia and their studios, and I feel like if Netflix were going to try and do the same thing that Google Stadia did and try to compete with Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo, I feel like they would run into some of the similar problems. Now, in terms of when this is going to launch, in this tweet here, it says, news story with Lucas Shaw, Netflix is planning to add video games to its service in the next year and has hired Facebook VR games content head and former head of mobile games at EA to run its new gaming division. So within a year from now, we should expect to see the Netflix gaming be launched, and I wonder what they're going to do in terms of how they're going to add it to the service, whether they're going to add it as just an additional feature to your Netflix subscription, or if it's going to be a side thing where you pay like an Apple Arcade fee, like $5 or whatever it is. I think with Netflix, they should just kind of add it in to their original plans right now, so that people jump in, try it out and like it, and then later on add more content to it, and then potentially add a fee. Because I don't know how big the market is for people who love TV and movies to play video games at the same time, because I know for me as a video game lover, that's what takes up the majority of my spare time. I don't have that much spare time, but when I do, I play video games, which doesn't allow me to watch nearly as many movies or TV shows that I would like to. I always see people discussing the latest show that's come out on Netflix, the latest Marvel series or whatever. I never get to watch any of that stuff until months or even years later. I just don't have the time to sit back and do that. And when I do have free time, like I said, I choose to play video games. But anyways, guys, that's it for me. That's a lot of information this morning. Let me know what you think about all of that stuff. Let me know what you think about Xbox's philosophy when it comes to game preservation. Let me know what you think about Gamescom and if you think Xbox is going to show off some cool stuff. And overall, let me know what you think about Netflix and trying to enter into the game streaming arena. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you're new here and you like what you see throughout this video, I'd really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button to help this channel grow and help grow this community, so we can have great conversations in the comments below. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you in the next video.